Hi, this is David Orlofsky, and welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. And whether you're watching with our friends over at Torah Anytime, or wherever you watch and listen to your podcast, as always, it's wonderful to have you along. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment. I've noticed a number of people have been leaving comments, and the comment says comment, because they were listening very closely when it says comment, and they made sure to comment. So shkoyach for that. And we are sponsored by Shmuley Rosenberg, Lilei Nishmas Bracha Charna Bas Meya Shammai. And the neshama should have an aliyah, and our learning should be a schus for her, or whatever it is we do here. Whatever we do should be a schus. Even if we just keep people busy so they're not speaking Lashon Hara for an hour, as the old story used to go about the Magid, that alone is worthwhile. And if we happen to learn some Torah and share some thoughts, that's also important. When I was a mashgiach during a particularly dark period of my life, so there was this one guy who never got up in the morning. And when you went into his room was covered in little pieces of paper with quotes on them. And they were absolutely fascinating, a lot of them. He said to me later that he did this because he was hoping the rabbis would get distracted from the quotes and leave him alone. And very often it worked, because it's amazing how, a really good quote can really make an impact on you when you think about it. And there was one, I mean, everybody had one, I suppose, that made an impact on them. Rabbi Flam, who was one of the Rosh Yeshiva, had lost an eye in a automobile accident. And he seemed to have focused on the quote that said, "In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king." And he just kept looking at that with his one good eye. But for me, there was one that made a deep impression on me. And it was a quote by Minnesota Fats. I assume nobody out there has ever heard of Minnesota Fats. He was a famous pool player. If you want to be a little more fancy, you could call it a billiards player. Yeah, but he was a pool player. They, in fact, made a movie about him called The Hustler, where Jackie Gleason played him because he was a very large fellow. And Paul Newman played this young guy who was trying to take him. He was the hustler. They later remade that like 30 years later with Tom Cruise, and Paul Newman playing the same role. But he's based on a real person, Minnesota Fats, the most famous pool player ever. And this is his quote. He says, "I'm a pool player. There's probably nothing in this world less important than a pool player. But for the record books, let it be noted, I'm the best." And that made a deep impression on me, because everyone knows the expression, anything worth doing is worth doing well. One could say the opposite. Anything not worth doing is not worth doing well. Yeah. So you wonder, I've dedicated my life to becoming a great pool player. What is the advantage of that exactly? What does that do? Okay, so you could argue as the Professor Harold Hill in The Music Man says, helps you cultivate horse sense and a cool head and a keen eye, yeah? So I guess you could say it's like any other sport in that sense, that it helps you develop skill. But to be able to do this for money, that this is how you make your living, that you should be remembered as a great pool player, very interesting. Those of you who are doing Daf Yomi, we had the Gemara in Sanhedrin of who is pasul fe'edus, who's not allowed to serve as a witness. There are certain people who can't serve as a witness from the Torah, a thief, person who has been caught lying and swearing falsely. These people, obviously, the Torah says they can't be witnesses. But then there's a list of Rabbanon, the rabbis decreed cannot be witnesses. And one of them is a gambler. What's the reason that a gambler can't be a witness? So So the Gemara gives two explanations. One is that when a person gambles, they don't want to give you the money. And nobody gambles expecting to lose, right? Except for me. When the Powerball or the Mega Millions gets over 500 million, so I will buy myself a ticket. And I know my chances of winning are less than getting struck by lightning. I'm more likely to get struck by lightning than to win the lottery. But for $2, you can enjoy the fantasy that I'm going to have $1 billion. I have to remember the last time I was in America and the Mega Millions was at a billion. I guess I was kind of surprised at the end. I still have the ticket. I think $1 billion would make a major change in my lifestyle, For one thing, I'll fix my car. But, so you're wasting money. But most people who go to gamble are not going to gamble to lose money. And in fact, you hear stories all the time where a person says, I'm only setting aside this amount of money, and they just keep playing anyway. And they end up borrowing more money. And, as one comedian said, you go to Atlantic City, and they have all these limousines and they have these tour buses. You come in a limousine, you go home in a bus, because you lost all your money. So, but people who gamble don't want to really give you their money. Why? Because we pay money for goods and services. I didn't get a good and service. I only bet on the assumption that I was going to win. Otherwise, you don't, I have, in my University of Continuing Education, I try to make it through the classics. As with my bathroom books, I read a page or two at a time. And I really went for it this time. I decided to read War and Peace, which is like 2,000 pages, a page or two at a time. But there's this one scene where this guy who is a hustler tricks this guy to gamble, and he keeps saying, I'm going to stop, and it keeps getting up more and more and more. The guy finally stopped. I got to like 46,000 rubles. He just decided to, feel bad for the guy. But he would have just kept getting deeper and deeper into debt, and his family couldn't afford it, and they had to pay the bills. A terrible story. But as you read the obsession, of course he wasn't playing to lose. He didn't want to give the guy the money. He didn't have the money to give. He was doing it because he was sure he was going to win his money back. He was going to get it back. So nobody wants to give it. Maybe I'll take a moment here to mention that gambling is genetic. It's an addictive behavior that they've shown already to be genetic. So taking that into account, my grandfather was a gambler. He didn't have much money, but he would play pinochle, and he would lose whatever little bit of money he would make. My father dropped out of school after ninth grade to go and get a job to help the family because there was no money. My father was a gambler. He didn't lose large amounts of money to the best of my knowledge, but he loved the action, the thrill that comes from gambling, I said, my father's not a gambler. Every now and then he goes and gambles. He says, did he ever lose money? Or did he always make money or break even? I said, Taka, he always either made money or broke even. He says, that's a gambler. A gambler never loses, And so, Mistama, I have the gene. So, not a story that I'm necessarily proud of, but that's not what this podcast is about. I had a Rebbe who once said to me, everyone has a purpose in life, Orlofsky. Yours is to be a bad example. So I've tried to live up to that. Nothing else that people can learn from my mistakes. In fact, I used to teach a rabbinical training course. And at the end of the year of my last class, I would do an evaluation of my course. And the comment that I got most often is, usually people only share with you their success stories. You always share your failures. I did this and that went wrong. I did this and that went wrong. And you often learn more from people's failures and what didn't work than just to listen to everybody, how everything went well. So I always try to live up to that. Anyway, so for my 21st birthday, my parents decided to take me to Atlantic City. They said, we will, bankroll you, but don't play stupid. So my father went to the dice table. It was too much noise and action for me. I couldn't even figure it out, but I know how to play blackjack. So I sat with my mother for 45 minutes. If I had 18, dealer had 19. If I had 19, dealer had 20. If I had 20, dealer had 21. If I had 21, dealer had blackjack. If I had blackjack, dealer had blackjack. I lost every single hand for 45 minutes straight. I couldn't win one. The way gambling works is that, there's some positive reinforcement to it. This is the people who set up the little table on the street and play the 3-card Monte or the shell game. They do it in such a way that you feel like you're going to make money and the shtick, and that's why they sucker you in. But I just lost for 45 minutes straight. At the end, I said to my mother, I said, look, just give me the rest of the money in quarters. I'll go to the video arcade. At least there I stand a chance. Yeah, I just lose every single hand, But people who gamble, and if you want to see that people who gamble don't want to give their money, look at little kids when they play dreidel. You give every kid like a little dreidel and 10 pennies, and they play. And at the end, the kid who lost all of his pennies says, okay, give me back my pennies. And the other kid says, no, you lost them. He says, no, they're my pennies. Doesn't even understand the concept. How could I have lost it? I didn't get anything. I didn't pay for goods or services. So that's one reason that a gambler is possible for Adis. The second reason is because you have to be involved in Yishuv HaOlam to contribute to the world. And the Bartanura says it like this. It is usher in this world to do anything other than Torah, mitzvahs, chesed, schira, malacha, and avoda. Right? Avoda is manual labor. Malacha is a craft, a shoemaker, a carpenter. And schira is a businessman. A businessman is contributing to society. That's why when Yaakov comes to Shechem, Rashi says he either built a shuk or he established a monetary system, a coinage, to help people do business. Business helps people grow. Otherwise, you just have the barter system. I give you apples, you give me wheat. But, if I don't have enough apples, you don't have enough wheat. I mean, there's no way to move beyond that. A coinage allows you to move to a whole different level of commerce to be able to increase it. So schira is essential to be able to keep society going. He says, but that's it. You can only be involved in something in this world where you're producing something. And if you're not producing anything, what about entertainment? I don't know. Because I distract people? Okay. Could be. You're making a contribution. Somebody asked me about the, people who, play sports and people watch it. So, okay. Maybe you're giving people entertainment or distraction. There are gamers who just sit online and play video games, and they film themselves playing video games, and people watch them play video games, which to me always seemed like an absolutely amazing thing. It reminds me when a couple of my grandchildren used to watch this kid, Ryan, and Ryan would play with toys and make a video, and they would watch Ryan playing with toys. And I would say to them, why don't you play with toys instead of watching somebody else play with toys? They couldn't even understand what I was talking about. Eventually, Ryan started marketing his own toys. Today, he's a multimillionaire. But it's amazing that, rather than going out and playing sports, people would rather watch people play sports. I saw a clip many, many years ago of a TV show called The Simpsons, where he was going to go into this tennis match, and instead, he hires a professional tennis player to play for him. And he says, says to his wife, you see, Marge, it's always better to watch things than to actually do them. What a Musa Haskell. That's what sports is. So, okay, sports, maybe you think there's some skill to it, but you're watching somebody else play a video game, or you're watching another kid play with a toy instead of playing with yourself. I find that just absolutely amazing. But, that's where we are, we're just watching other people live life rather than actually living it ourselves. I think it's kind of sad, but okay. But a pool player. So, okay, maybe if a person himself wants to play pool and develop some skill, cool head and a keen eye, yeah. So then maybe it's something, yeah. But you always have the other possibility, yeah. That is that it just becomes something that distracts you from something that's more important. Yeah, and that's trouble, my friends. With a capital T, and that rhymes with P, and that stands for pool. But so okay. The reason I mention this is because he says, what I'm doing is essentially unimportant, but I'm the best at it. And it leads me to what I wanted to talk about today. There's a Gemara in Sanhedrin that discusses what the purpose of a hesped at a levaya is. Is a hesped for the living or for the deceased? Meaning, is it a covered for the deceased that we are eulogizing him? Or is it a covered for the living that they have a chance to get covered by speaking about the person who was nifter? And they bring a lot of rayas back and forth until the Gemara finally concludes it's a covered for the mace. The nafkamina being, if a mace says, well, if a mace is talking of a bigger problem, but if a person says, I do not want any hespedim, then you don't make a hesped. The family cannot insist on having the hespedim because it's not for them, it's for the deceased. So, and that's why Rabbi Yoshev and Rav Shteiman both requested no hespedim. When Rav Shteiman did it, it was not observed as meticulously as it was by Rabbi Yoshev. So the deceased, the nifter, has the right to forego that. It's interesting because those of you who are familiar with my work, then probably my most well-known talk that I give is called Why Be Jewish? And in it, I talk about the idea of wanting to live a meaningful life and how everybody wants to live a meaningful life. Yeah, I'm borrowing from that for a moment. If you'll forgive me, those of you who have listened to it before, you're going to hear it again. Although I was once in Melbourne, Australia, and after I gave the talk, this woman comes up to me and says, this is the 12th time I've heard this speech. I said, I'm sorry, I could have done a different one. I got a lot of material. She says, no, I came dafka to hear it again, because it's essentially the first two lines of Mesilas Yesharim, and the Mesilas Yesharim says in his introduction that the only value of this sefer is constant review. So the more you chaza over it, the better it goes. And that's why I've given that talk, I'm guessing hundreds of times, definitely 100 times, but maybe hundreds of times. And people say, how are you not bored of it? And I said, because I'm inspired by the talk every time I say it, besides the fact that hopefully people get something out of it, because the chazara is so important. But I mentioned now everybody, at their end of their life wants to be remembered as being somebody important and having led a meaningful life, So I said, you ever go to a levaya where there's nothing to say? Harry loves cigars. Harry always had a cigar, and loved to have a scotch, None of this fancy stuff today. A regular Chivas, that's what he would drink, and smoke a cigar. And he'd read the New York Times. He would read it from cover to cover. And Harry's lying there thinking, there's got to be something else. Nope, that's it, Harry. Yeah, on your tombstone, we're going to put a box of cigars. And that was it, And that's it. And I would tell the story about when I was talking to young men about getting married. And you have to figure out what your goal in life is. And the guy says, I know my goal in life. It's to be a dentist. I said, that's not your goal. He says, sure it is. I said, when you're 80, 90 years old and you're on your deathbed, what do you want him to say? He was a dentist. He filled many cavities. He removed many impacted teeth. I mean, your tombstone will be a big tooth. You know what I mean? That's it, So I was talking about this, right? Even a mafia hitman, no one's going to tell the truth. Vinny, he was a great killer. He killed lots of people and always in creative ways. They're not going to say that. They'll say, Vinny was a good friend. Vinny was loyal. Vinny was good to his mother. They'll find something positive to say about them. But how are you remembered? So very often when I would do this, people would say, what do you want people to say at your funeral? And I said, look, he's moving. I love that line. But anyway, the idea of Hespedimo is such that what is it that you're trying to say? So I was a magician in my youth. That trick where you saw a woman in half? Well, I have two half sisters. But anyway, that comes from like one of these magician joke books they give you, because most magicians have absolutely no personality whatsoever, So they have to have people write them jokes, which is called patter, which is just, to distract people while you're doing whatever it is you're trying to do. That's the whole purpose of patter. So I didn't need that. I was able to be entertaining. I wasn't such a great magician. I used mostly mechanical tricks and stuff. But there's all these, please note at no time do my fingers leave my hands, This is a great trick. My brother used to do this trick. He was good with his hands. He gets out in 5 years. But these are all just magician jokes, what I mean? They're a whole song of magician jokes. But anyway, so I was doing a particular phase, and you would hang out at magic shops. I once went to Tannen's. I don't know if it's even still around. This was in the 1970s, yeah. But Tannen's was considered the number one magic store in the world. It was in Manhattan. And when I was there, all the kids who were there were crowding around this one fellow who it turned out was the amazing Randy. I was not so familiar with him, but at the time he was considered the, most famous escape artist of the time. He did amazing escapes. He later became known for exposing Uri Geller as a phony, psychic. And he was very good at that. And he was telling stories about what he did. It was fascinating. That was one. There was a place in Long Island, in Rockville Center, where I lived. I lived in North Merrick. I wasn't that far. Called Esposito's. I used to hang out over there, and he would show you how to do tricks, and then he'd sell them to you. And most of the stuff I really couldn't use. But one time, my father brings me to this old magician called Al Flasso. He died a few years after this. And he had a magic shop in downtown Brooklyn near my father's store. And he takes me to Al Flasso. And he's very old. And I'm going to break the magician's code and reveal to you how to do a particular magic trick. You'll forgive me. There's different types of producing flowers, flower productions. One is with what's called spring flowers. These are flowers that have a spring on them, and you hold them closed. So you keep them in all bunched up. When you pull them out, they spring open. It's a great illusion. The other one is what are called a feather bouquet. These are all feather flowers. And because the whole bouquet is made out of feathers, it compresses and opens up. That's one of the reasons you'll always see when magicians are producing things, it's usually like silk scarves, because silk, you can pack it very tightly. Yeah. So there is the standard feather production is you take a cloth, you go this way, that way, you reach underneath and you pull out the feather bouquet. I'm going to teach you how to do this. Yeah. You put it in your sleeve beforehand. It has a little ring at the bottom that's sticking out. You hold up the cloth, doing it this way, that way, and you reach for the little ring and you pull it and pull away the cloth at the same time. It's very, very fine illusion. Yeah. So Orlofsky says to me, you know how to do the feather bouquet? I said, sure. He says, watch this. And he goes like this and produces it. And I was surprised because everyone always uses the cloth. He says, that's my move. I invented that. Yeah. And he shows me what he does. He puts it in the sleeve of everybody else, but just even without the cloth, he just uses his hands and pulls it out. And he does it quick enough that it suddenly looks like it just appeared. It's an even better illusion. You don't even need the cloth. And he said, remember, kid, that's my move. There's other people use it, but it's my move. He died a few years after that. I read in his obituary. And they didn't mention that Orlofsky was the one who developed the barehanded feather bouquet production. More's the pity, because that's how he wanted to be remembered. That's what you do. I might be a magician. It may not be that important, but I'm the one who developed the barehanded feather bouquet. I remember reading the obituary of the fellow who designed the Pringles can. And that was what his whole obituary was about. And he lived to a nice, ripe old age. And the only thing anyone could have to say about him was that he invented the Pringles can. And that's his legacy. I don't know if he was buried in a very big Pringles can instead of a coffin. I don't know. But that was his contribution, was designing the Pringles can that looked like a tennis ball can. You know, it's like, from a packaging point of view, this was a major step forward, you know. And you read these obituaries. This guy came up with the slogan for this ad campaign. This person did this one came up with that. And how are you remembered? What did you do afterwards? And, you know, it's something that's so sobering. I've told this story before, and it's not a pleasant story, but they took me off of Nucky Radio anyways. I don't care. But I suffer from type 2 diabetes, and it's done all kinds of terrible things to me. It's the reason I had my heart attack. It's the reason my arteries are all clogged. And when the guy went to do the stents, you know, he says, all of your arteries are clogged, everything, even the minor arteries. The diabetes wreaked havoc with your circulatory system. You know, you better try to get this under control, because you're not going to keep going this way. And it does lots of stuff. You know, it hurts your eyes. Most of the amputations today are because of diabetes, kidney failure. It's just terrible, And one of the things it does is to slow down your digestive system. So it's a constant problem of constipation. That's why when I get these nasty comments that says, Orlofsky, you're full of it, it turns out that they are correct. Anyway, so one time I headed to Kufa before I knew that I had to be taking something to deal with this. And it was almost 2 weeks that I was constipated. I, of course, Googled it online, and they said, you can die from this. And I said, wouldn't that be the final irony? I will die from constipation. Because when you do, nobody cares about anything you've ever done in your entire life. The entire shiva will be, did he try Raisin Bran? Did he go for a walk? You know, did he drink? Did he try this? And that would be my entire legacy, just talking about the fact that I died of constipation. And I figured that would be it. You know, that would be my legacy in life. So it brings you to the point where when you look back at life and you say, how do I want to be remembered? What are the things that I want to do? I remember Mendel Weinbach said to me once, he quoted Julius Caesar. He says, I'm quoting Julius Caesar. Are you familiar with it? And I said, yes. We actually acted it out in high school. It was the beginning of a very fine career for me because I didn't get the big parts. I got all of the minor parts. So they basically, all the major parts they gave to other kids, and I got all the minor parts that weren't given out, which I reached my highlight when I did the entire crowd scene in Julius Caesar when Mark Antony's giving his famous speech, you know, and I was the entire crowd. Anyway, I pulled that off so well that became my go-to. So in Macbeth, there was actually a scene where I had to kill myself. I played both the murderer and the victim. so I did that. But he says, I can't quote this anymore, you know, when I speak here in Or Sameach, because college kids have no education. They don't know anything. You make any reference to them, they don't know what you're talking about, you know. And in fact, when I taught in Or Golah, I was talking about how little college students know today. And this was 20 years ago, 25 years ago. I said, they did a study. How many books does the average college student read a year? Less than one. That's the answer. So it's amazing. In fact, when I first started teaching in Discovery of maybe around 35 years ago, it was, I guess, they said we used to have 2 1.5-hour classes dealing with evolution, and we got rid of them because as time went on, we ended up spending most of the first class teaching the theory of evolution, and then the second class explaining why it didn't make sense, because most of the students had no idea what it said. So now instead, if at some point any of the participants in the question and answer or in Dr. Schroeder's classes or anything, someone says, what about evolution? We just say, yeah, that's not a problem. And everyone says, okay. In fact, I met somebody who went to work on a college campus for an organization and said, you know, when you said this in class, I didn't believe it. I didn't believe it. And now that I'm on campus, I cannot believe the level of ignorance that these kids have, how little they know, and they care even less. It's just an amazing thing how university education has dropped. And this has finally come public when you see what's going on in campuses and things like that. And suddenly it's driving home to everybody. You spend all this money for this, you know, degree, and you're not getting any education. You know? I told the story years ago. I spoke to a group of non-Jewish parents, and I was talking about, I said, look, we send our kids to college, and what do they do most of the time? Drink and party. That was the answer. I spoke to secular Jewish parents. I said, we send our kids to college, and what do they do most of the time? Drink and party. I spoke to a group of Orthodox parents. I said, we send our kids to college, what do they do? I'm not talking about people who are going to like, a regular, college where there's a Torah program with it, or people who are in yeshiva and just going, part-time to college. I'm talking about people who go full-time to college. They send their kids off to regular colleges. I said, we send our kids off to college, and what do they do most of the time? Study. I said, someone here is out of touch with reality. I said, you understand a full schedule in college is 2 mornings and 2 afternoons a week. That's a full schedule. I said, what do you think they're doing the rest of the time? This is not the University of Vienna in 1898 where everyone's walking around with briefcases searching for the meaning of life. It's my I know when they talk to people, you always try to sign up for the easiest classes and the easiest professors. You're not looking for that guy from the paper chase who's going to drive you crazy. You're looking for somebody who's going to, give me the easiest time to be able to pass. As Tom Lehrer in his song about his time in Harvard, he later became a Harvard professor. The last line was, he goes, "And we'll sleep through all the classes and cheat on the exams, and we'll pass and be forgotten with the rest." So, yeah, that's more or less the college experience, A fellow who went on to become Rosh Hashiva was describing his daughter's high school. And he said, "It reminds me of when I was in dental school." He says, we take in free patients and we basically practice on them. And, they don't have any money. So the best they can do is come to dental school and have these kids who are learning to become dentists practice on them. And of course, you always find the easiest case because you don't want to, you don't want to challenge yourself. You want to get a good mark. So one time I said, I'm not getting an education this way. So the next time I took the hardest case and I didn't do a very good job and I got a bad mark. And the head of the program calls me in and says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm trying to learn how to become a dentist." He says, "Listen to me closely. Your job here is to pass, graduate without anybody knowing who you are." He said, "I feel the same way about my daughter's high school." But, you don't want to have to be challenged in that way. So people go to school and, they just want to get through. Do they know anything at the end? Did they learn anything in the end? Doesn't make a difference. So we come at the end of our life, and a lot of people just want to get through without anybody knowing who they are or what they did. And what's remembered afterwards? What is that epitaph? What is around at the end? So I've put into my tzava, and I've told my kids, and I tell anybody who I feel like is close to me, that I've made it very clear I do not want any hespedim when I die. First of all, I've been maspid so many times when I'm alive. Every time I get up to speak, I get a bigger and bigger introduction, and they get more and more over the top, and, I'm not like Moshe Feinstein. Moshe Feinstein would get these unbelievable introductions and he wouldn't even be misyaches to them. I'm not that good. I told the story where Dovid Cohen gets this over-the-top introduction and he says, "I wish my parents could have been here to hear that. My father would have enjoyed it and my mother would have believed it," So, I get these things over the top. I have one of two things that I usually say, either I say, "Wow, I realize we're pressed for time because there was so much more to say and I guess we just didn't have enough time to cover everything." Or I say, "Wow, after that introduction, I wish I was you so I could be sitting in the audience listening to me." But I don't need any more hespedim. Plus, I hate speeches. I always hated speeches. I can tolerate mine, but otherwise I don't like to sit through speeches. In fact, there's this great picture of me that someone took once where I was on a panel, somebody else was speaking, and I have this look on my face. That's what I look at these speeches, So I said, listen, at the Levaya, I'm still there, so I don't have to listen to speeches. Just put me in the ground as quickly as possible. I appreciate everybody coming. Either it's hot or it's cold or it's raining. I don't know, stand there and listen to speeches, Just put me in the ground, then make a big shloshim. Have everybody and their brother speak at the shloshim. I don't care. I won't be there. I'll be comfortably in Gehenna, enjoying, my just desserts for all the terrible things I've done, And that's better than having to listen to all these speeches, It's like this rabbi brings his synagogue group to Israel and he gets captured by terrorists. And they say, we're gonna kill you all. So they say, can't we have one last request? I says, okay. So the Rav says, I've been working on my Rosh Hashanah drasha all year. I want to give my drasha first. He says, okay. The Chazan says, I've just written a new Nisana Tokef. I've been practicing it, for months. I want to give my Nisana Tokef. He says, okay. And the president says, I have my state of the synagogue speech. I want to give it first. He says, okay. The Shamash says, listen, first grant my request. He says, what's that? Kill me first. Rather than to sit through all these speeches. So that's how I feel, And my wife and my kids are like, no, you have to have speeches. I said, no, the Gemara says beferish, I don't have to have any speeches. I don't want any speeches. They said, someone has to say something. I said, I'll record something. I said, I wouldn't mind listening to that. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. I guess if you're here, then I'm horizontal. Let me just take a real long room and see who didn't show up because I'm going to come back and haunt you. So I got to get around to recording that because you never know, I wouldn't want that to go out. But, because to me, you know how hard it is to say something meaningful in that kind of a situation. In fact, there's a story, the Taz married the Bach's daughter. And when she died, he gave this unbelievable hesped. And afterwards, after whatever time passed, he wanted to marry his other daughter, and the Bach said no. And he says, why? He says, because that hesped was too good. You had to have prepared it while she was still alive. And if you could write a hesped on my daughter when she's still alive, I don't want you marrying the other one. Yikes. Why? Because the hesped's not so good. Everyone knows it. So that's why a shloshim, let everyone sit down, put out coffee and cake, and let everybody talk. I wouldn't have to be there, That's the old speaker's joke. It's an old speaker's joke where the speaker gets up and he says, there was this Jew who was, put into the Colosseum and had to face hungry lions. And the lions come at them and he yells something to the lions. They turn around, they crash out of the gate and run into the countryside. So Emperor has no choice. He frees him. And he says, what did you tell them? I said, they're going to be speeches after dinner. That's the idea. Sometimes people tell me, oh, you're such an interesting speaker. And I said, I'm not such an interesting speaker. I'm such a terrible listener. I hate listening to speeches. So, but the idea is that whatever people are going to say, they can say during the Shiva, everyone can share stories and whatever they want. I put in a couple of other things. I don't want those sound trucks. I don't know if they have these in America, but in Israel, they have these sound trucks going around, which are blastingly loud and you can't hear what they're saying. Was gerede it's like, what did he say? What? And you keep listening out the window. And it gets closer and closer. They mumble it on purpose. I don't know why they bother doing this, So I said, I don't mind if they want to put up those big death signs. That's okay. So they can put up those little notices, but I don't want the sound truck. And I've told my family and all of my loved ones, whatever happens, I don't want anyone speaking to any publication about me. Let them make up whatever they want, but don't let them tie it onto something. I remember, I won't mention which publication, but I don't know if it makes that much of a difference. But when Rav Kreisworth was Nifter, they write this whole article. And Rabbi Twersky, who was his grandson-in-law, now he runs Toras Chaim, he says he's reading this and none of it's true. Some of it was half true. Some of it was nothing. It was made up. And he said to them, how did you put this out? None of it's true. He goes, yeah, we had a deadline. So we just made it up. I said, listen, let them make up whatever they're going to make up. I don't want them quoting anybody. I've had very bad experiences with the media, including the From media. Not a fan. There was, I will qualify this. I used to write a chinuch column in the Hamodia, and I had only the finest experiences. They edited my articles heavily because I'm too controversial for that. Often they would criticize me that my columns were too clever. They have to be simpler. Preferably in iambic pentameter, what I mean? The reason children need that. Everyone has to make sure that eat a healthy breakfast, whatever it is, So, but when people would write in a letter, they wouldn't publish it until they showed it to me and give me a chance to respond. And if I asked them not to publish it, they wouldn't publish it. There's a different publication that had asked me to write, and I said no. And so they had they said, okay, well, can we call you up and ask you questions and we'll write up your answers? And I agreed. So what did they do? They print a letter from somebody attacking what I said. They didn't understand what I was saying in the first place. The whole thing was just, half of it was character assassination. They never showed it to me beforehand. They never asked me. They didn't give me a chance to respond. The next time they called me, I said, I have nothing to do with your publication. This is a Torah publication, not where I come from. This concept that everybody has a right to say any yichi, nasty thing they say because it's a letter to the editor, because we're the media. Chas v'shalom. I've seen letters to the editor where they attacked Gedolei Torah. Somebody wrote a letter, where they were attacking Rav Pam, and it was printed just the way it was, and then saying, "Who's this Pam guy who said, well, you published that? That's ricious. I'm sorry. You call yourself a Torah publication? You should be closed down immediately." And any place that publishes these kind of things. And so some of them say, well, we publish anonymous letters, but we see who the people are. That's nonsense. The person who you're attacking had the decency to sign their name to what they were saying. Then you have the decency to sign your name to your attack. You don't write something anonymously. I don't care. I don't give your initials. You got something to say. You sign your name and you stand up to it. So why do they want to sign the name? They don't want to face the consequences. Yeah, though maybe you should think about that before you write something attacking somebody in the publication. You don't want to face the consequences, but you're okay attacking somebody else? This is mamish. I don't understand how anyone thinks this is mutter. These letters to the editor column are mamish usher. And when you have these quote unquote from, news sites where they allow comments, these vicious comments and lashon hara and horrible things, there are certain sites where my videos go up. And when people write nasty comments about me, I don't care. I keep it up. But when people say things about other people, I immediately erase them. I don't, who do you think you are? You're going to get on and make some nasty comment about somebody anonymously, you coward. I don't care. I would love to hear from any of these from publications what your heter is to write letters anonymously attacking people. What right do you have? This is mamish and issa d'oraisa. I don't care what you call yourself, a Torah publication. Nonsense. It's mamish rishus, and anyone who does it should close it down. That's what I think. And that's why there was one publication where someone who writes a regular column asked if he could interview me, and I said, absolutely not. I don't believe in the quote unquote Torah media. I think it's a terrible thing, And he says to me, I agree with you, but I got a column. So I'm sorry I went on a little rant there, but I said, anyone who feels that they're karov to me, please do not speak to any of these publications. If anyone gets up, if you have to be at the Levaya and they're giving a hesped, stand up and make him a cha. Say, no, he doesn't want it. Drop this guy in the ground now. Put him away. Let's take this sucker home already, And that's it. And if there's a sound truck, stick a cloth on that loudspeaker over there, So that's it. I've got other stuff in there, but since I'm talking about Hespedim, So, but that doesn't mean there isn't something to say. people want, so what do you want them to write on your matzeva? Your name could be here. I'm willing to sell advertising. But seriously, if I had to write an epitaph, it would be, he tried. Not even that he succeeded. I don't need that he succeeded, just that he tried, That's it. That's all that I could ask from anybody to remember afterwards. And besides, there are hours and hours about me out there on the internet. I was saying something once in a shir, and they said, "Oh, you're lucky it's not being recorded." I said, "Do you know how much stuff there is out there that's recorded that I've said that's outrageous? Don't worry about it. If anyone wants to take me down, let them take their best shot. I've said so much stuff, and I'm not really afraid, at this point." So, but the point is, when you see what is important to people, Al Flosser wanted to be remembered for the barehanded feather flower production, Minnesota Fats, that he was the best pool player of all time. Houdini was known as the greatest escape artist of all time. That's how he was remembered, And that's not how the Chofetz Chaim is remembered. And, somebody who's great is remembered for the things they've done, the things they've said, the things they've built. That was a story I drifted off in the middle. My ADD kicked in. And that is, he says to me, I can't quote this line from Julius Caesar because none of the kids know what it is anymore. That's how I got distracted, yeah. I started talking about colleges and I forgot why. Now I remember why. He said, Mark Anthony says, "The evil that men do live on, but the good is often forgotten." I think that's the quote. I may be paraphrasing. And he said, in Yiddishkeit, we say just the opposite. The evil that men do is forgotten because it's not real. Ra is an illusion. V'kol harisha ke'oshen tichla. All of the evil will disappear like a puff of smoke. It's not real. All the good things you do are real. That's why when a person dies and they say all these nice things about him, people are complicated. Nobody's perfect. Yeah. I always tell my wife, you got the last one, There's an old joke. I was always waiting for Mr. Right. And I didn't realize his first name was Always. But, nobody's perfect. So we're all a mixed bag of good and bad things. But when a person dies, right, that's the old joke they tell you, Acharei mos kadoshim. After you die, everybody's a kadosh. But the reason is because the bad things that you do aren't real. They don't represent you. They're not your real etzem, right? As the Gemara says, nobody sins except because of the Yetzer Hara or the Shibud Malchias. It has nothing to do with who you are. Be'etzem, you're a good person. And so the good things that you do live on after you're gone. And that's how we have to live our lives. We have to live our lives hoping that the things that we do in this world, when a Yortzeit comes around, so it's a Yom Adin for the Niftarim. As I mentioned, in Shvat is the Yortzeit of my mother and my father. And my mother came from a house where her father didn't go to shul on Yom Kippur. And my father got no Jewish education at all. He got very little secular education also. He dropped out of school after 9th grade to go to work to support his family. But they made a sacrifice to send their kids to yeshiva. They made that choice. And they became frum after my father's heart attack at the age of 67. And because of that decision to get their kids a Jewish education, they have over 100 great-grandchildren who are all being brought up in Torah and mitzvahs, which is an unbelievable record of accomplishment. And that lives on. And every Yortzeit comes around and you look at the list of children and you look at the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who are in Habatzis HaTorah. I'm not the only Rabbi Orlofsky running around out there. There's a whole bunch of us, if I ever get them all in one place, I want to have a podcast with, we'll call it the Rabbi Orlofsky Show with all the Rabbi Orlofskys. I think that would be very exciting. But anyway, at least from my family, there are other Rabbi Orlofskys out there too, and other cultures and languages. But the point is that you build something in this world, and that lives on beyond you. And so you have to decide whether it's going to be a particular magic move, that I played pool, that I was an influencer and pushed products, I made a lot of money, or that I lived an exceptional life. And that's it for this week. If you want to find out more about the show, you can go to my website, rabbiorlofsky.com. You can sponsor an episode, sponsor a question and answer, sponsor a Parsha in 5. You can listen to old shiurim and read other articles that I've written. You can sign up for one of our online shiurim. I've started to get some interest in the question and answer shir that I had mentioned before. So I have already a few people who have written in that they're interested. If you are interested in signing up for a question and answer shir, where we answer the basic questions of Judaism and Keseder and go through it, please write and let me know, and we will organize that, assuming that we can get that going. And that's it for this week. Until next time, I am Dovid Orlofsky, and this has been the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.
It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Knowledge and wisdom will help you grow. Lots of fun in every episode, and we don't have to rhyme. No, we don't. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show on RabbiOrlofsky.com. Torah anytime, YouTube and more. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Torah and Simcha, ready to go. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. Till next time, till we meet again. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show. It's the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.